First stop on the train is Chief Justice Roberts. Why? But not just because he's the chief of the Supreme Court, but because any appeal that comes out of the DC, the Trump administration, by claiming that the Supreme Court has power under what is referred to as the All Writs Act, but that's very narrow in application. It doesn't apply to the facts of this case. Appellate courts goes firstly to Chief Justice Roberts on an emergency application. He could have denied this on his own, but he decided, I guess, anything related to Trump, he's going to throw it back to the entirety of the 9 justices of the panel.
Trump has a huge problem. His whole legal plan was based on one thing, claiming presidential immunity. The goal? Delay trials long enough so he could get back into office and make the charges disappear. But now the Supreme Court has shut that down with a major 6-3 ruling, leaving his legal team scrambling. And to make things even worse, Trump's own lawyer accidentally admitted in court that not everything a president does is official business, meaning some actions aren't protected by immunity. Big mistake. This ruling is a big win for American democracy. It means presidents aren't above the law. But for Trump, it's a nightmare. He might actually have to face consequences like any other citizen. Before we dive deeper, I have a quick favor to ask. If you're enjoying this content, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It's free for you, but helps us out a ton. Did you subscribe? Awesome, thank you. Now, back to the video. Ever wonder what happens when a president thinks he has an invisible shield protecting him from the law? It's like watching someone confidently walk straight into a glass door. Except in this case, the glass door is the entire US justice system. Trump's legal argument has always been shaky. He's been trying to claim that presidents can do whatever they want as long as they call it official business. It's like a kid yelling shotgun to claim the front seat, except he's trying to dodge legal consequences. And that's what his team hoped the Supreme Court would buy into. But now, with this new ruling, that argument is falling apart fast.
The way it works in court, a little bit of a legal breakout session, is if you have a temporary restraining order, which is only in place for a short amount of time, in this case, it's only in place for about 5 days, you wait until there's a preliminary injunction of one Hampton Dellinger, who ran in an emergency injunction and obtained a temporary restraining order from a federal court judge in the District of Columbia, at which time then the courts of appeal have jurisdiction. They generally don't have jurisdiction over temporary restraining orders.
During the oral arguments, Trump's legal defense didn't just hit a rough patch, it completely collapsed. His team walked in with confidence, believing they could convince the justices that a president should be shielded from prosecution for nearly anything. But within minutes, that confidence turned to panic as the justices started tearing apart their argument piece by piece. It wasn't just skepticism, it was open disbelief. The courtroom atmosphere shifted as the justices threw out tough, almost ridiculous hypotheticals, and Trump's legal team struggled to keep up. The cracks in their defense widened with every question, and soon, their entire argument was unraveling. Then Justice Sotomayor delivered what could only be described as a legal obliteration. With a sharp, pointed question, she exposed the absurdity of Trump's argument in the most brutal way possible. So, according to your theory, she asked, her voice calm but cutting, a president could order Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival and still be immune from prosecution? The courtroom was silent for a moment, as if everyone was waiting to hear what excuse Trump's lawyers could possibly come up with. But before they could even stammer out an answer, she continued, her tone thick with sarcasm. What about organizing a military coup to stay in power? Immune? What if the president takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon? Still immune? She let the questions hang in the air, each one hammering home the sheer ridiculousness of their legal position. The tension in the room was undeniable. The justices weren't just poking holes in Trump's argument, they were shredding it. You could practically see the panic set in on his lawyers' faces as they realized the Supreme Court wasn't buying what they were selling. This wasn't going the way they had hoped, not even close.
It's not an office devoted to prosecution like Jack Smith's special counsel. It's a term of art being used for an organization that's responsible for things related to the enforcement of laws related to federal workers, an important position. But Donald Trump doesn't want Hampton Dellinger. He doesn't want independent watchdogs. He doesn't want anybody serving out a 5-year term on his watch. And so he fired him without cause. And the problem is, by firing him without cause, he violated the due process rights. Overly qualified for the position. If you ever wanted an ethical, stand-up, trustworthy fellow or woman to take that position, you want somebody that looks and acts exactly like Hampton Dellinger.
The justices were basically asking, so, a president can commit actual crimes and just get away with it? And Trump's legal team stood there awkwardly like, well, yes? But when you say it like that, it sounds bad. When pushed on whether there were any limits to presidential immunity, Trump's lawyers started sweating through their expensive suits. One justice threw out a question. If a president takes bribes in exchange for ambassadorships, does that count as an official act? The legal team's response? A word salad with no real answer, about as coherent as Trump trying to explain nuclear policy. It was painfully clear they hadn't prepared for the radical idea that presidents shouldn't be able to commit crimes. The courtroom vibe became something between a stand-up comedy show and a classroom where the kid who didn't study just realized there's a test today. The justices weren't even hiding their frustration anymore. Trump's lawyers kept insisting that practically anything a president does could be labeled official and therefore immune from prosecution. It was like watching someone try to convince Gordon Ramsay that a microwaved hot dog is fine dining. The justices weren't buying it, and you could almost see Trump's immunity argument deflating in real time. Then came the moment of pure gold. The justices decided to flip Trump's own logic into a joke. So, could a president rob a bank and call it an official presidential cash collection, they asked. And according to Trump's legal theory, why not? His lawyers scrambled to come up with a response that wouldn't completely destroy their case, but it was too late. The absurdity was already exposed for the whole world to see. What made this moment even more chef's kiss perfect was how quickly the justices sliced through the nonsense. Trump's team kept arguing that presidential powers were basically unlimited, but the justices countered with even more ridiculous hypotheticals that showed how dangerous that thinking was. They weren't just skeptical about Trump's case, they were deeply worried about what this would mean for every future president. Because if a president can just slap an official business sticker on anything and avoid consequences, then the presidency turns into a 4-year crime spree. Want to get rid of political enemies? Call it national security? Need some extra cash? Just declare it official presidential fundraising. The justices weren't fooled. Trump's legal arguments were so weak that at certain points the courtroom felt like a mix of bewilderment and secondhand embarrassment. His lawyers were basically saying, okay, sure, our argument doesn't make sense if you think about it, so please don't think about it. And now, Trump is facing what might be his worst nightmare, being treated like an ordinary citizen who actually has to follow the law, just like everyone else.
The United States Supreme Court has just ruled against Donald Trump and his efforts to remove from office the head of the Office of Special Counsel, Hampton Dellinger, relatively well. He was appointed by President Biden, to serve out a 5-year term. He just got the appointment a couple of months ago to be the head of the Office of Special Counsel. That's a special creature. It's not what it sounds like. Both opposed Justice Roberts in allowing Hampton Dellinger to remain as the head of the Office of Special Counsel for at least 5 more days until the trial judge holds her hearing.
Imagine a man who spent his entire life believing that rules are for other people, suddenly realizing he might actually have to follow them. It's like telling a toddler they can't have ice cream for breakfast. The tantrum is inevitable, but the rules still stand. But if Trump thought being treated like a regular citizen was bad, just wait until you hear how his own lawyer accidentally wrecked his entire defense. When you're paying top dollar for legal representation, you at least expect them not to make things worse. But that's exactly what happened when D. John Sauer stepped up to argue Trump's case at the Supreme Court and struck out so hard that even Little League players would cringe. Trump's legal team had one simple job: convince the justices that presidents should be able to do literally anything in office without consequences. It was supposed to be an easy play. Just repeat total immunity over and over until everyone gave up. But then Sauer made the mistake of accidentally telling the truth. When the justices started pressing him, Sauer slipped up in a way that legal experts are calling a total disaster. He admitted, right there in front of the Supreme Court, that some of Trump's actions as president were actually private, meaning they weren't covered by immunity. You could almost hear the record scratch across America. This blunder was like watching someone saw off the very tree branch they're sitting on. And once Sauer admitted that some presidential actions weren't official, the justices pounced on him like cats on a laser pointer. Okay, if some actions aren't immune, then which ones are? Where's the line? Is ordering a Diet Coke official business, but threatening election officials just Trump being Trump? This opened the floodgates, and suddenly, Trump's immunity argument was spiraling out of control. What happened next was the legal equivalent of bringing a knife to a gunfight, except Sauer brought a banana and then slipped on it himself. His team scrambled, twisting themselves into pretzels trying to walk back their own admission. Well, when the president does it, it's official, except when it's not, but we get to decide when it is, unless we don't like the outcome, in which case it's definitely official. Even the conservative justices were looking at each other like, is this guy serious? You just know Trump was watching this disaster unfold from Mar-a-Lago, turning a shade of orange that scientists haven't even discovered yet. I can picture him throwing chicken nuggets at the TV, yelling, "You're fired." at a lawyer who couldn't hear him. But that's the problem with hiring yes men. Eventually, they have to face people who ask real questions. The justices, sensing weakness, tore into Trump's legal argument like sharks at a feeding frenzy. Justice Sotomayor wasn't having any of it, making it clear that this nonsense was turning into a mockery of American democracy. She and the others forced Trump's team to explain the difference between official and unofficial presidential acts, something they clearly hadn't prepared for, like students who skipped studying for a test because they thought they could just wing it. Then came the moment that perfectly captured just how absurd Trump's argument was. Remember when he bragged on the campaign trail that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose voters? Well, his lawyer had to stand before the highest court in the country and seriously discuss whether that hypothetical murder would be protected by presidential immunity. Spoiler alert, it did not go well for Team Trump. The justices threw out even more ridiculous examples. If a president robs a bank, is that just official presidential cash collection? If he assassinates a rival, is that official enemy elimination? Trump's legal team struggled harder with these questions than most people do assembling IKEA furniture. Legal experts are calling this one of the biggest self-inflicted legal disasters in Supreme Court history. Sauer's admission completely destroyed the sweeping immunity claim Trump had been pushing for years. It's like someone swearing they're a vegetarian while being caught on camera, devouring a plate of ribs. It kind of ruins the whole argument. But as bad as that moment was, the real betrayal for Trump wasn't coming from Democrats, prosecutors, or the so-called deep state. It was coming from the Supreme Court justices he personally put on the bench. For years, Trump bragged about his Supreme Court picks like they were trophies from a golf tournament. "I gave you 3 beautiful Supreme Court justices," he'd remind his rally crowds, as if he had personally delivered them into the world. Whenever legal trouble loomed, he'd wink at his supporters like, "Don't worry, I've got friends in high places." But here's where this story takes a twist that even House of Cards writers wouldn't believe. The very justices Trump appointed, the ones he expected to protect him, apparently remembered something important. They swore an oath to the Constitution, not to Donald Trump's personal legal defense. When Trump's immunity case landed in the Supreme Court, you could almost hear his confidence from Mar-a-Lago. After all, he handpicked 3 of these justices: Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. These were supposed to be his ride-or-die judges, the ones who would bail him out when things got tough. He probably thought this case would be easier to win than a rigged carnival game. But then, something unexpected happened. These justices, especially the ones Trump appointed, started asking tough questions and poking holes in his argument. It was like watching someone suddenly realize that the bodyguards they hired were actually working for the building, not for them. Take Brett Kavanaugh, for example. Trump stuck by him during a confirmation process that was more dramatic than all seasons of The Bachelor combined. You'd think Kavanaugh would owe him, right? Well, it turns out when you give someone a lifetime job interpreting the Constitution, they might actually take that responsibility seriously. When it came time to rule on whether presidents could do whatever they wanted without consequences, Kavanaugh wasn't exactly rushing to Trump's defense. The conservative justices sent a clear message. Look, we appreciate the job and all, but we're not going to burn down the entire American legal system just so you can skip some court dates. Imagine Trump's face when he realized those black robes weren't just MAGA hats in disguise. The best part? Trump seemed genuinely shocked by this betrayal, as if he forgot these people actually have jobs that don't revolve around making him happy. He demands loyalty above all else, but sometimes people remember they have responsibilities to something bigger than one man's ego. The Supreme Court ultimately ruled 6-3 against Trump's wild immunity claims, with Chief Justice Roberts making it crystal clear: the president is not above the law, a direct contradiction to what Trump seems to believe. The ruling was split along ideological lines, but not in the way Trump expected. His own appointees sided against him, proving they weren't just his personal bodyguards in robes. Justice Sotomayor didn't hold back in her dissent, warning that this decision dangerously pushes America toward a presidency that operates above the law. To Trump, that probably just sounded like a great business plan. Predictably, Trump responded with his usual rage, ranting online, sending fundraising emails, and playing the victim. But the reality is much simpler. Even the Supreme Court justices he picked showed more loyalty to the law than to him. And for a man whose entire worldview is built on transactional loyalty, that's gotta sting. So Trump's grand immunity defense just went down faster than his spray tan in a swimming pool. The Supreme Court basically told him that being president doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. Shocking concept for a guy who thinks rules are just suggestions for other people. But don't worry, folks, our favorite orange defendant still has a few tricks up his sleeve. Legal experts say he'll now waste everyone's time arguing about which actions were official and which were private, because nothing screams innocent like stalling for years. The walls are closing in on Donnie Diapers, but he's still desperately searching for an escape hatch. The clock is ticking.